Hi, yes. First and foremost, thank you very much to those of you who allowed me to either pounce on you to record an interview earlier in the day. And something that really impressed me was the number of people that came up to me over the lunch period and said, I am so nervous, but I want to have a go at this. So bravo to all of you who did that today, and thanks very much, and went to the trouble of giving an interview. I honestly believe that once you've done it once, actually that's the one hurdle over. And I think most people said, well, actually it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. So, there's a lesson in itself. I hope you'll be really amazed, following on a little bit from Martin's talk there, that I attended a Google Hangout this week. I think even before this week, and maybe you will have had similar experiences, I thought a Google Hangout was going to cost a coffee to check out my Facebook account. But it turns out no, there's more to it than that. And the Google Hangout that I took a look at was entitled How to be a Successful Digital Academic and Boost Your Career. And just picking up on Martin's point that he made about, it may not help you get tenure, or it may not help you get the job of your dreams. Interestingly, two of the academics that were talking as part of that Google Hangout, both said that they got their dream jobs through their involvement with social media. They were clearly good researchers as well, but they actually got the jobs of their dreams in recent years because of what they were doing on social media. One of those was a person called Inga Mewburn. You may have come across her, if any of you has heard of a blog called The Thesis Whisperer, which is aimed at people like yourself. Some of you may watch it, may check it out. It gives advice and tips to PhD students on a whole host of things. Inga Mewburn, an academic, has 40,000 followers on her blog. That's pretty impressive. And she's got something like 20,000 Twitter followers. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Another of the academics on that Google Hangout said that they'd had the opportunity to make collaborations and networks that they just wouldn't have had the chance to do through any other forum other than through social media. And they felt that social media gave business organisations and policy groups and think tanks a bit of a friendly face, and that it opened doors for them that otherwise would not be open. So if you're looking to make those collaborations and create those networks, it seems to me that social media is definitely the way to go. I thought it might amuse you to know that when I started working for the BBC in the 1990s, telling all sorts of stories, not just research stories, but all sorts of stories, that it was in the days of typewriters, for a start, and also that instead of what you saw me doing today, some of you, editing on a laptop, using a handheld digital recorder, it was the days of reel-to-reel tape. And you would literally bring an interview back on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I would use a yellow pencil, a soft yellow pencil, to mark the point on the tape that I wanted to make the edit, and get a razor blade, my goodness, can you imagine, to cut that piece of tape, pull the bit out that I didn't want, make another yellow mark, put that bit of tape round my neck, and stick it back together with 2 bits of sticky tape. We've come an awful long way, and how things have changed. In 2008, after 15 years of working for the BBC, I started working as a freelance communications consultant, working almost exclusively with academics, and it's one of the best things I ever did. I had a lot of fun, and it's been a fascinating few years, and how things have changed even in that time. I mean, in those days we were sort of creating hard copy newsletters, annual reports, fairly static websites with maybe a few news stories on, writing traditional press releases, at a push trying to place stories with journalists to generate media coverage. And within a matter of months and a couple of years maybe, all that started to change, and we were sending out newsletters via email. We set up a podcast series where we were interviewing academics and putting out audio interviews, the like of which we were doing today with some of you. And what's a really interesting point I wanted to make about that was, I think within a few months of sending out these sort of email-targeted campaigns, we noticed, you can get some sort of feedback information from that. So, for example, if we sent out 6 stories via an email campaign, and say one of those links was through to a podcast, we could see how many people had clicked through to that link, obviously. And on one occasion, something like, I think about 250 people, it was the top link clicked through, was a podcast. And we could drill down even further and see that of those 250 email addresses, something like 75 were .gov email addresses. So who does that tell you who's listening? Policymakers. The people we wanted to target with our policy-relevant research were actually clicking through and listening to podcasts. So I think it's an important message there, is that the people that you want to get through to are using these means to access your research as well. They're interested in it, and they're interested to get it in these different formats. They don't necessarily have the time or the access to journal articles and things like that. That's not to say that there isn't still a place for traditional formats as well. So that's a bit about me and my background. I'm now director of a company called Research Podcast. You can probably tell I'm pretty passionate about podcasting, from the BBC background. But what I really want to tell you about as well today, before we talk about your research stories that we recorded, is Ruth's research story. Now, Ruth is doing a PhD at Essex, and she came on a media training session that Pam Cox and I ran last year. And she's looking at the nature and prevalence of unreported domestic abuse in Essex. There's something apparently like 95% of cases of domestic abuse go unreported. She was seeking to identify those at risk and put services in place to support them. And she was doing it collaboratively with the local county council in Essex. She was looking to create a better understanding of the scale and scope of the problem of domestic abuse. She was looking to improve engagement with victims, increase referrals to specialist services, reduce domestic abuse, and ultimately reduce the cost of domestic abuse to all of us, to all taxpayers, which stands at something like £5.5 billion. So she came on the training, and she was really keen to get her story out there, keen to have a go, but didn't really know how to go about it. So that's the first thing she did, was go along and get some training. This is what she did as a result of that. She managed to get a blog published on a blog that was produced out of Essex University. She also went on to get some local press coverage, which was really, really fabulous. I think you can see there some of the sort of the positive things. I don't work directly with victims, but the idea that my research will have a positive impact on people is a real, real motivator. So how did she go about doing that? What sorts of things did she learn on that training? The key things was that she had the chance to take a little bit of a step back, if you like, from her research, and really think about what the key things that she could communicate through a blog and through a piece of journalism, effectively, through working with the media. And she took the time to stand back, think about what she wanted to say, and got that out there and did it really, really effectively. So what do we think that Ruth is doing right? She started thinking about impact in her PhD right from the outset. I think she was just in her second year of a PhD when she came on the training. She got some training and support in communication and media engagement. She got some tips from people who've done it, people like Pam, people like me. She seized those opportunities and prepared effectively for them, and I think that's absolutely key. And one thing that she used, which is very important, and I think is one thing that maybe you could all take away today, is that she used simple storytelling techniques. These are things that are taught at primary school these days. The 5 W's. What, why, who, where, and when. If you can distill your research down into those 5 things, you can tell a story. Okay, you can tell a story by using that. A little bit of H, which is how, but not too much of the methodology, because let's be honest, that's probably going a little bit too far. We don't want to be talking about how many regressions you're running in your research, how what modelling techniques you're doing, or how many variables you're going to run, because the general public just isn't going to understand that. So she thought about the 5 Ws, she thought about the language she was going to use for that audience, she thought about who the audience were, who would be listening. And when you think about it in terms of the collaboration she was doing with the county council, the people she would have reached potentially, her partners, people that she was looking to work with, people she was looking to get information from, as well as potential victims of domestic abuse. We're moving down that pathway towards potential impact, really, really important. And she wrote a blog and she gave a media interview and she generated really, really positive coverage about her PhD. And she felt really good about it. I think that's one of the key things to say. These are really, really good points. You all know, you've spent a few months doing your PhDs now and you're going to spend several more months doing them. You get so engrossed in the subject. You get so bogged down in the detail that is sometimes really, really tough to take a step back. Take a step back. She says that by coming on that training course, by really thinking about writing a blog, engaging with the media, she's learned to take that step back and look at the bigger picture and identify how her research could be of interest to the general public. I think that's absolutely key, rather than just to fellow academics, an academic audience. She's learned to present her research in a clear and coherent way to a broader audience, and she's applied what she's learned to her academic work and used, actually, interestingly, the same style, she says, in a conference abstract which was then accepted. So there can be benefits to you. I guess the message I'm trying to get across here is that there is quite a lot in it for you. It's not just an add-on or something you should feel that you should do or you've got to do. There potentially really is something in it for you as well. So again, thanks to everybody who gave an interview. I'm pretty sure the next slide is going to be listening to yourselves. So if you did, well done, bravo, thank you for taking part. And listen carefully to the way you talked about your research. It's really tough having a microphone shoved under your nose, completely unprompted. You didn't have time to prepare. I'm sure all of you would have done an even better job had you had a bit of time to prepare. And that's a little tip as well to think about, is don't ever get caught out on the hop with a journalist. Always take your time. If somebody does approach you, I think it was Pam said this morning how unprepared she was when she went on a radio show. She hadn't taken time to think through what she was going to say. If you did get caught on the hop and a journalist rang you up and said, I want you to talk about X, Y, or Z, buy yourselves a bit of time. Say, I'd love to do it, but right now I'm tied up. What's the deadline? Can I get back to you? Get some support. Get some support from the communications team at your university, that sort of thing. So let's have a listen.
My name's Neela Burgess and I'm from King's College, London, and I'm researching the B student, the overlooked sixth former, who everybody will take the money from to go to university, but actually they don't really help them when they choose their courses, their university, their degrees and things like that. Because what I find is that people are creaming off the elite. So the schools love the bright kids, the universities like the bright kids, everybody wants them, and we have this massive swathe of sixth former who gets overlooked. What I hope to do is show that we really have got to. I know it's an old chestnut, there's a lot of people have said it before, but we do need to offer an alternative to university. Instead of just making everybody go to university, is trying to offer an alternative. There are kids out there who actually, it's the default position, but university isn't necessarily the best place for every sixth former. Amongst that B student band, there are more of those kids who, if they had an alternative, decent apprenticeships, vocational training, they might choose it.
I'm Sam Wilding and I'm studying at the University of Southampton. My PhD will be using NHS hospital records to understand where people who use mental health services live and tracking those individuals over time and to look at which sort of areas they move to. So do they get stuck in a downward housing cycle or do they get entrapped in deprived areas? There's a complete lack of knowledge of where these people live. There's lots of literature in the US and that helps services provide and target where to find these people and what kind of help they can get.
It's early days, but ultimately, who do you think might benefit from what you're looking into and what you might find?
Primarily the people who are in need of mental health services themselves. There's a very large number of people who require mental health services, and it's growing year on year as people become more aware and it becomes more of a public issue. So in order for it to be addressed properly, we need to understand where services are needed most.
It's Lindsay Morgan. I'm from Lancaster University. I'm going to look at the difference in self-confidence and student experiences between dyslexia-friendly schools and those children that are just in mainstream primary schools. Just to help children in general, but then society as a whole, to help people to come out at the other end with education, basically, to help the economy and society overall. There's 10% of the population that are dyslexic, but obviously the society as a whole to stop people from being illiterate, which is a big problem in this country. I'm going to compare children experiences between the two schools, those that are in dyslexia-friendly schools and those that are not, and to see how they're experiencing schools, to see if they're happy overall and if they're learning.
My name's Daniel and I'm from the University of Surrey. Sometimes people the closest to us, the people in our group, can do something wrong and we feel maybe perhaps guilty or ashamed of what they've done. But other times we can distance ourselves from people and we can feel angry at them. So my research is about when do we feel angry at someone else's behaviour versus when do we feel guilty. It's quite interesting because Eric Pickles wrote to the Muslim community in England saying that they should do something. They should do something to say that they are part of Britain, saying over the acts in Paris, perhaps should they feel guilty? And I'm trying to say, do they feel guilty or do they feel angry? There's current political discourse and how do you treat groups? And it's quite relevant to those processes there. What behaviour stems from these emotive experiences, and how should the government interact with when groups do something wrong? So it can inform that kind of decision and maybe not have a mistake like what happened recently.
My name is Sarah Carter and I'm from the University of Southampton. Well, I've just started my PhD. I'm 2 weeks in. So I'm hoping to look into infant and maternal health care in the UK and the US. Juxtapose the two of them, and more specifically on what sort of maternal indicators have impact on the type of childbirth and the type of infant feeding. I think it's hugely important for women in both the US and the UK and throughout the entirety of the world. More specifically focused on C-sections and the huge increase in C-sections across the developed and developing world. And I think that has big implications for women and taking ownership of their healthcare.
Okay, hi, I'm Joe. I'm from the University of Liverpool. So I'm doing a history PhD looking at anti-slavery in the 19th century and looking at trying to apply ideas of supply chains and networks to that. And I think it's important because recently we've seen a lot of concern about modern day slavery, and a lot of the talk about that has been like how people profit indirectly off it through network and supply. I'm kind of looking at seeing these arguments in the past and see what happened about that then. See if that can teach us anything really for like modern policy makers and stuff like that, or maybe just evaluate how useful terms like supply chain or network even are really. I do a lot of work with the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, people who are interested in the subject and like the museum sector as well. I think it's got a lot of applicability if I can get my words out.
My name is Bernice Kwong and I'm from Southampton doing a PhD in demography. I'm looking at fertility and family change in the Philippines, and all around the world families are changing, the structure of them and the size of them, what constitutes a family and what doesn't. So I think it'll be interesting to see how things are changing in the Philippines and how the legal and political landscape is supporting that. The Philippines is a little bit conservative, and in a lot of conservative countries families are changing. So if there's better understanding out there, then women, families, children will be better served. So I think everyone stands to benefit from just better understanding and better acceptance and acknowledgement of these emerging family forms.
Okay, I think that deserves a round of applause, frankly. I'm really sorry. I had so many interviews, I couldn't include them all, but I am going to be working with David and his team, hopefully to share those via Dropbox or something. So for those of you who didn't hear yourselves today, there may be some opportunity in the future. But I hope you take heart from that. I mean, how coherent, how clear, how brilliant were those interviews? I mean, just on no notice, just with a microphone shoved under your nose with, me asking you questions. So, bravo. You've You're already nearly there. So I hope that gives you the confidence, those of you that had a go, to know that you can definitely go on and do it again, and those of you that didn't have a go, that you could perhaps have a go at something like that. So that's really important. So just a final few tips and thoughts and comments from me. The key things to think about are your audience and language that's appropriate for the audience. Understand the opportunity and go out there and maximise it. If you understand what you're letting yourself in for, then you can make a good job of it. If you understand you've got 3 minutes on the radio, well, of course you can't talk about the whole of your 4-year effort or your 3-year effort of a PhD, but you can, fine-tune that and get across some sort of simple key points and messages. Prepare those key points, deliver them coherently, concisely, clearly. Maybe work with your comms team at the University of Essex to get some support there. Get some advice from an academic who's done a lot of it already. Get some tips. That's key. There are a few tips from Ruth as well, because I think that's really important. Here's somebody who's been through it, was at the stage that you were at a year ago. And, these are really, really good bits of advice that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. Remember, you are the expert. Sometimes, you know too much, and not everybody knows as much as you do. So go to some effort to set the scene if you're writing a blog, or if you're recording a podcast, or if you're going to be on the radio, etc., etc. Use those 5 W's to help you structure your stories and tell your research stories simply and clearly and in a nicely structured way, and make the most of any media opportunities that come your way. And from me, something that Pam said this morning, I hark back to that: be on the front foot, be positive, be upbeat, don't apologise. There were a couple of points at which I said to people today, don't be on the back foot about your research, be very much on the front foot. You've got nothing to apologise for. Identify those opportunities to share your research, work out who might be interested. Like I said about targeting those policymakers with the email campaign and the podcasting. Embrace and use social as well as traditional media, those blogs, podcasting, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is. Find your thing, find what you like using, enjoy it. Have fun with it as well. I think that's absolutely key. And then, really communicate effectively and concisely with simple, clear messages that can get points across. Get some training and support. Please do that. You will find Ruth, after a morning spent with a couple of people, was able to go out and write a blog and, get some really positive coverage of her PhD research. Impact is all about those relationships and having a go. Get out there and use it. Thank you very much indeed.